The Pest and Predator Podcast is brought to you by Field Heroes, powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Visit fieldheroes.ca to learn how beneficial insects can benefit your farm. Welcome to the Pest and Predator Podcast, brought to you by Field Heroes, powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Visit fieldheroes.ca to learn how beneficial insects can benefit your farm. Today's guest of the Pest and Predator Podcast is Nevin Rosaasen. He is the Sustainability and Government Relations Lead with Alberta Pulse Growers. Hey, Nevin, how are you doing today?
Great to be with you, Shaun.
Yeah, it's great to chat with you. So we've been having great conversations about beneficial insects here on the Pest and Predator Podcast, and we're into season 3, and we're having a lot of fun. So tell us about the pest we're featuring on today's episode.
Sure. So today's pest is commonly known as bertha armyworm, and it is certainly a common pest of oilseed crops, including canola and flax. However, this pest can also invade faba bean fields in late August, perhaps the early days of summer, because faba beans tend to have green plumage in late season. Faba beans are an indeterminate crop, so the plant continues to flower until either a killing frost or the crop is terminated with a desiccant or pre-harvest herbicide. So as such, faba fields are a host for these late season bertha armyworms who are trying to complete their life cycle. And although it's a better known pest of oilseed, specifically canola crops, they can present a challenge in faba beans as well.
So let's talk about the beneficial insect that preys on this bertha armyworm.
Sure. The pest most common predator is Banchus flavescens, and what it looks like is it's an elongated wasp with distinctive segmented body with a very long, what we would call ovipositor, or it kind of looks like a long tail. It is a light yellow. It can come in colors of black as well. There's some shades of orange on the tail body part, or ovipositor. And this predator lays its eggs in the first to third larvae stage of bertha armyworms. And the mature larvae are then killed prior to entering the soil to pupate over winter. So this natural enemy does not destroy the larvae prior to the crop damage occurring. However, it keeps these populations in check. Often we see bertha armyworm impact limited to 2 to 3 years at most, when this beneficial parasitoid wasp runs its course.
So if growers want to protect this beneficial insect, how do they do so when they're growing pulses?
Absolutely. And because it's not a huge pest of faba beans, we often see these parasitoid wasps along the stems. They have very long antennae that are rapidly moving back and forth, trying to locate their prey. And so it's important to understand what are the parasitoids of this, what can be a really economically damaging pest, specifically in canola crops. So the biggest thing is to know that when you're scouting your fields, you should be looking for this parasitoid when you're looking for that predator or that pest in your canola, but they often show up in faba beans as well. So how can you protect this beneficial insect? It's to only spray when your bertha armyworms have reached that economic threshold in your canola or in your flax crop.
And what are the dynamic thresholds here that we need to be paying attention to?
So dynamic thresholds are a different concept than an economic threshold. Dynamic thresholds are very, very difficult to establish. And that would be, say, if you have so many bertha armyworms per square meter, how many Banchus flavescens do you have in that same area of the crop? Now, we haven't established dynamic thresholds because it would require almost a PhD project and years of study. But we're moving towards saying that if you see this parasitoid insect present, that you should limit your spraying. And that's, again, this parasitoid doesn't terminate that larvae. The larvae will still prey on crop, but it helps to keep their populations in check into future years. So dynamic thresholds are something that we would love to work towards with our bright entomologists. However, it requires quite a few years of observation, and it's an area we'd like to move more into.
And does this beneficial control other pests or just more specifically the bertha armyworm?
So bertha armyworm is the big one. There are other pests such as clover cutworm, spotted cutworm, and these you can locate in your field guide to predators and pests. Of course, Field Heroes is the source of all information when it comes to parasitoids, predators, and of course your common pests within crop. So they are a form of control of other pests, but not necessarily of the common crops that you would have in rotation here in Alberta.
What other pests should pulse growers be on the watch out for inside those pulse canopies?
Sure. So a big one for faba beans is lygus bugs. Lygus have those sucking mouth parts that can blemish the seed coat of faba beans, and that can result in disqualification for human food markets. So lygus bug would be our biggest pest of faba beans. And there are some parasitoids and predators that offer some control, such as damsel bugs or green lacewing. These are common predators of lygus. Pea leaf weevil is another pest of pulse crops, specifically in peas, but they also really like faba beans. And there are a few predators, including ground beetles, as well as rove beetles that can help keep those pea leaf weevil populations in check as well.
It really does speak to the importance of the scouting, because if you don't do the scouting component and you just kind of willy-nilly just go out there and just spray, you're costing yourself money when maybe you didn't need to, but you're also, you don't have all the information, right? Like this just reinforces the need for the scouting component.
Absolutely. Scout. There's nothing like boots on the ground. And you can look at some of the maps that the Prairie Pest Monitoring Network provides in regards to pea leaf weevil, lygus, even bertha armyworm. But the main thing is to get out to understand what are the parasitoids, what are the predators. And when you're scouting pulse crops, you always need a shovel. Most of what's happening in that pulse crop is below ground, including the nodules. So you need to get out and dig up some plants, look at the root zone, try to identify what are those pest species, such as pea leaf weevil, but also look for some of those predators like lacewings as well, ground beetles, rove beetles. Those play a really important role in keeping these pest populations in check. So we rarely reach threshold for any pests other than, say, lygus bug in faba beans. But again, you hit the nail on the head. Scout. And that's the most important thing, is to identify what insects are in your field, what role they play, whether they're a pest or a predator, and to make sure that you're up on all of the photos that are in that colorful field guide put out by Field Heroes.
Now, we know in the case of weed identification, identifying a weed the wrong way can lead to using the wrong chemistry. In the case of the Banchus flavinus, can we misidentify it if we have it in our net? Can we mistake it for something else, or is it pretty distinct?
It is a very distinct, very elongated wasp. They're fairly slow moving. They're easy to observe. And once you have seen a video or a photo of them, it's very easy to identify them. So just like your weeds, we have tools to help you identify these parasitoids in your field. Certainly one of the best ways to learn about pests in your field is to tune into Alberta Bug Chat on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. during the growing season. And at that time, we'll often be posting pictures on social media, on Twitter. We'll be taking photos from producers, agronomists out in the field, helping to identify these pests. Certainly, again, the best tool to arm yourself with is that Pest and Predators field guide by Field Heroes. Certainly, that's a good first start. And we have a lot of adult education and extension to do in regards to insects, specifically those beneficials that are helping keep those insect pest populations at bay.
Nevin, thanks a lot for joining us here today on the Pest and Predator Podcast.
My pleasure, Shaun. Thank you for the opportunity.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Pest and Predator Podcast. It's brought to you by Field Heroes, powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Visit fieldheroes.ca to learn how beneficial insects can benefit your farm.